there's a lot to do.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of them are in leadership of churches and ministries and have their own ministries and are prophetic and are gifted.
Yeah.
And it blew my mind until I went through what I went through. I said, I had no clue. So now that I know. But anyway, I grew up with a good dad, good mom. I went to Purdue University, a Big Ten school. My dad went there, my brothers went there, my grandpa went there, so I had to go there. But I did not want to get into ministry. I had a sales and marketing degree. I ended up selling software to banks. That was my career, basically, my background. So I sold a lot of software to banks in the Midwest, Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky, and did a compliance software company to keep the banks in compliance with the laws for loans and new accounts and so forth. And I got married right out of college, like within a week. It was really rushed. I mean, it wasn't rushed. I knew her for a couple of years, but I would have preferred to wait longer. But we got married. We had 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. When my son was 8 years old, he essentially had a boy that was 9 that taught him some things sexually he should not have taught him or showed him, and it really messed him up. It really messed up my family. We put him in Christian counseling, thinking that would fix it, and after 10 years of hell, it did not fix it. Medication could not fix it. It was a demonic issue. I did not recognize it at the time. I'm trying to, be a good dad and try to control an uncontrollable kid that doesn't listen to me, that tells me what to do. You don't do that. I grew up with a dad I respected, and so it was very, very challenging to manage the family, and we thought about moving out of the home several times. We didn't do it. Ultimately, my wife decided to file for divorce. She had her own challenges with growing up with a father that was not as loving as he should have been. He was controlling. He was, he would read the Bible, but he would basically thump it at you, and he would not be unconditionally loving. And ultimately led to my divorce. I didn't want to go through. But from that point forward, it's like everything in my life had changed. And I thought I wanted to have like $1 million and that would take care of all of my problems, but it didn't. I'm like thinking, well, if you have money, you don't have problems, right? I'm like, no, people have problems. More because they have more money, And so ultimately, when the divorce went through, it was in June of 2008, the Lord spoke to me really clearly and said, what is it that you want out of your life? And I was like, well, I thought it was money. I'd rather have peace if I had to choose between peace and money. I'd rather have peace and money, but if I have to choose, give me peace and not money. And so he said, good choice. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take away all the money that you have. It's going to be gone. And I'm going to change your heart, though, in the process so that you have my heart. And when I have your heart being my heart, then I said I can help you to have the money come back even way greater than it was before. We could use that money for kingdom purposes and not for your own selfish purposes. And so I agreed it. I'm like, okay, deal, done deal, thinking there is no way I'm going to lose. I had about $500,000 saved up at the time. And I ended up going through a divorce, and that took about 55% of the money away, so that was quick. But I'm like, there's no way I'm going to lose this rest of this money. And well, then this is in the fall of 2008 that the Lord started speaking to me more, and he said, now you're ready to look for your next wife. And I'm like, I am? And like within the same sentence, I was like, I am. I'm ready. I'm like, where do you find a wife at, these days? Go back to college, and go to grad school, or what? Go to Walmart, no, don't go to Walmart. So I ended up going to my church because there's a large, I've been to like a Church of God when I started out as a little kid. I was in a Presbyterian church, I was in a Pentecostal church, I was in a Seventh of God church, and at that point I was in a non-denominational church of about 3,000 people, so it was a large church, and they had a large singles group. So I went to the singles group, and it was kind of like you to me, because all these girls are checking out the guys, all the guys are checking out the girls. It wasn't pure. And I could sense it, I could discern it. I'm like, I don't want to be here. I want to be where there's a woman that's really of God. And so I ended up not going back there. I ended up going on an internet site, a Christian site called ChristianCafe.com, and found a woman there that seemed to be of interest to me. We ended up talking shortly after that, and she wanted to meet me. We ended up meeting right before Christmas. I met her family, and she invites me on Christmas Day to go to a Morris Cirillo conference. Who here has heard of Morris Cirillo? Okay. I had never heard of the guy in my life. I'm like, well, who else is going to be at this Morris Cirillo conference that's supposedly really anointed, she said. And she said, Benny Hinn's going to be there. I'm like, okay, I know Benny Hinn. And John Hagee's going to be there. I know John Hagee. Other guys were BB and CC Winans were singers. Britt Nicole was an up-and-coming singer. Reinhard Bonnke was there. So a lot of famous people that I did not know because I wasn't in that realm of ministry. So I ended up going with her. That was in January of 2009 to the Morris Cirillo Conference. It was a week-long conference in Nashville, Tennessee. And there's like 3,000 people there from around the world, and most of them are outside the United States because that's where he does his ministry at. He always lives in San Diego. Right. So I remember the first night we were there, I put my hands up to praise the Lord to sing songs, and all of a sudden my hands started to shake like this. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? You know? It's never done that before. You know, here I'm trying to impress this woman. And she said, why are your hands shaking? I don't know. I go, maybe it's the anointing you're telling me about, you know. And I've never shaken before, and I can't make them stop. So after we got done singing, they stopped, thankfully, otherwise it would have been weird. And then the next day, they asked us to serve at their book table for Morris Cirillo, which I agreed to do. So here we are serving at the book table, and people coming up to us asking, like, can you have your wife give me that book that's behind you? And I'm like, that's not my wife. And they're like asking her, can you get your husband to give me it? And I'm like, we're not married. We just met a couple weeks ago, you know? So then that night, the second night, they ended up having us sit in the second row, front and center. And there's like 60 rows there. We're sitting I'm like, what are we doing sitting up front? God, this is not where we're supposed to be sitting. You know, I don't even know if I like Morris Cirillo yet, you know. He's kind of a weird voice, you know. And, yes, he is. Just being honest. So we're sitting there in the second row, and the Lord's like, this is exactly where I want you to sit. I'm like, really? Okay. Well, then the girl I came with said, like, we need to run to the front because, you know, it's going to be really anointed at the end of the service. And I'm like, run? I'm like, oh, we're going to beat like everybody by falling up to the front because they're all older than we are. I go, I'm in the second row. So I'm like, why are you so anxious about running? So she ends up pushing me out basically to get to the front, you know, at the end of the service. And here I am standing about 10 feet away from Morris Cirillo, who's on the platform. And the Lord speaks to me really, really clearly. And he said, you are going to love her like Christ loved the church. And I was like, what? Nobody can do that. That's a suggestion by Paul, you know. We're supposed to aspire to that, you know. But nobody ever does that, you know. So I'm like, what does that mean? And he wouldn't say anything. He just said, you're going to love her like Christ loved the church. So I was thinking, wow, I'm honored, you know, whatever that means. And I guess I found my wife. That was quick, you know. He did that in a couple weeks. You know, good job, Lord, you know. And so then that whole week, we had a lot of people that prophesied, and I never had any prophecies over me. So I was always interested in wanting to get a prophetic word. But all the prophetic words that we got were all the same. And so I knew by the time I got like the fourth one that this has to be the Lord. There's no way that they can just collaborate and make this up, you know. And the words are essentially that we would flow in the giftings of healings, deliverance, and prophetic words of knowledge. And that we would have a ministry working with people around the world that were having marriage problems. You know, they've gone through divorces, that had children that have been molested, a bunch of messes and stuff in families. And so I'm thinking, wow, I got a little experience now with some of these messes. I'm like, I could see ourselves maybe doing that. You know, and so we ultimately got married, a lot shorter than I would have, but we had all these prophetic words. We also went to, you ever heard of Mariah Woodworth Eder? Yeah. So I forgot about this part. So she started her healing ministry in Columbia City, Indiana. That's where I was born at. Literally blocks from where she started the healing ministry. So that's kind of funny. Well, her great niece, Glenda Jackson, who I believe lives here in California, Glenda was at this conference. This is like a couple weeks after Morris Cirillo conference in Nashville, Tennessee, the very same hotel. And the Lord told me to go up in front of her and she would prophesy over her. And again, she's met Jesus and she's prophesied on the Sid Roth show a bunch of times. So she prophesied again. She was like, oh my, Lord, show me you have a marriage made in heaven ordained by God himself. I'm like, what? Who has that? You know? And you're going to be going around the world, traveling, all these, you know, family problems and stuff. And I'm like, wow, okay. So it was, and another prophetic word that was kind of way out there that actually did come to pass shortly after all that. So we ultimately got married, and all that I knew about this woman that I was marrying was that she seemed godly. She read the Bible, she could prophesy, she could pray in tongues, but she had 3 divorces. And the first marriage lasted 5 years, the second one was 2 years, and the third one was about 14 months before separated. He worked for Billy Graham. And but I knew that we were supposed to be married, you know, so I'm like, I'm going to do this, you know, and because I'd gone through a divorce myself. So we got married, and on our wedding night, I saw a side of her that I did not see when we were dating. And she was becoming very angry and mean and not godly. And the Lord spoke to me that night. He said, in fact, I said to him, I'm like, what did you do to me? Well, I'm supposed to love her like Christ loved the church. It's supposed to be good. He said, well, yeah, kind of. He said, but you're going to lay your life down for her in every way. He goes, she's got a lot of pain because of what she went through in her life. And she's going to take all that pain out on you. And you can't tell anybody about what you're going to go through. Not one human being is allowed to know on earth. He said, you have to go through this. He said, when you come out the other side, then he said the anointing will be pretty strong and extreme, and then you can do the ministry that you were prophesied over. So I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, she's a girl. How bad can it be? You know, I'm a guy. You know, and so I agreed to stay married, and within a couple of months, we started getting mentored from a guy from Torrance, California, over the phone, and he taught me about my authority. And I never heard that before. He said, Nelson, when you pray, you don't have any prayers of authority. You pray like a lot of the people in church, prayers that the demons don't have to leave. So he said, he goes, what happened to your son? He said he was affected, he was essentially molested, and these demonic spirits have a legal right to come into him, and they've been tormenting him ever since. And he's been horrible to you, horrible to everybody else. So he said, you need to take authority, command the demons to go from him, and overnight you'll get your son back. So I'm like, okay, that all makes sense. I'm a smart guy. I think somewhat smart, you know, but I can understand things that logically make sense. So I'm going to try and do that. So the next day I did. I asked if I could pray for him. He said yes. I just said, I command every spirit that's not the Lord to go in Jesus' name, and I release peace over your mind, and I look for demons to fly out. And I didn't see them. So I'm like, did it work? I don't know. Well, then the next day, I just forgot about it. I mowed the grass outside, and he had not mowed the grass for a couple of years for me. Never willingly did it. He comes walking out of the house, and he comes up to me, and I turn off the mower, brace myself for something mean like he's done for 10 years. And he said, hey, Dad, can I finish mowing the grass for you? And I about fainted. I'm like, what? That is not my son. You know, I like this new kid. You know, who is this? And then he said, also wanted to get a haircut and apply for a job at Burger King, which he had gotten fired from Kroger like a year before. And so I gave him the mower. I go in the house, I fall on the floor, I start crying. I'm like, Lord, what happened? He said, you got your son back today. I'm like, you're kidding. I go, that was all there was to it. I said, well, prayer. I'm like, why didn't you tell me this 10 years ago? You saved myself a lot of hell. God, it was horrible the last 10 years. He said, well, because Nelson, that's part of your ministry. You had to go through that. You had to walk it out. Otherwise, you have no experience with what you're going to be doing in the future in your life. And so I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense. And so I go, what do I do with him now? He said, just love him. You know, he said he's going to be mending all those mindsets and all the torment that he had. Just love him. And so I actually texted him today. He's completely changed. Instantaneously, he was changed. His looks changed over, this is a year between, but this is the before picture of him. And you can see in the eyes are the windows to the soul. Showed me. See how dark, and then this is after he got to it.
Oh my gosh, that's a different person.
Guys are wondering.
Wow.
That's not even the same person.
Oh, wow. Praise God. Thank you, Jesus.
So I got my son back after 10 years of hell, and so after that I'm like, okay, God, I'm all in. I want to do this. This is awesome. Well, meanwhile, my wife was getting worse and more mean and saying things to me, and so I tried it on her, and it didn't work, you know, and I couldn't tell our mentor about it. The mentor was teaching us some things, and I was listening, and she was very anxious and fearful, but she would go very mean to me and go off on me for a couple of hours at a time, pretty much every day, and then it became physical, where she would like throw knives at me or glasses at me or chase me, and Redondo. In fact, I was on Huntington Beach at the beautiful Hyatt Regency Hotel, and I remember she chased me because she wouldn't. I wanted to get away from her because she was berating me for a couple of hours in the room, and so I wanted to leave, and then she chased me down the hallways for like 10 minutes before I could lose her. And I'm like, this is nuts, Lord. Why am I going through this? This is like after maybe a year and a half of it. And then it went on to 2 years, and it kept telling me that it'll be worth it in the end. It'll be worth it in the end. Someday it'll be good to be Nelson Schuman. I'm like, well, right now it sucks to be Nelson Schuman. I don't like to be me. I don't want to be me. I go, and then after 3 years, she would tell me, she goes, the enemy's telling me bad things about you. So I'm thinking, aha, there's the key. The enemy, you know it's the enemy. I go, so why are you listening? Because I'm not listening. I don't hear what you're hearing. The enemy's not telling me whatever. I go, all I see is the behavior that's coming out of whatever the enemy's telling you. And so it went on for 4 years, and then it became 5 years. And I was just getting worn out. I'm like, God, I can't do this much longer. I said, I want to do ministry with her. And I go, and she's stopping me from doing ministry. And he wouldn't tell me what she had. He just kept saying, it'll be worth it in the end. And someday it'll be good to be you, and people will love you and stuff. And I'm like, really? I'm like, I'm ready to say goodbye to this because this is nuts. I go, I love her like Christ loved the church, like you told me. But I said, it's not working. You know, she's not able to get fixed from whatever. And so, but I could see things spiritually. I could understand what was going on with pains from her father, pains from her mother, pains from the 3 men that had divorced her, all this stuff. And had to deal with her sons as well, and had to pay $85,000 for her sons over 4 years. And I went into debt of like $85,000 for them. So literally I had to go through what God told me I was going to go through. And after 6 years of it, I was starting to learn about my own praying for myself for healings. I prayed for other people, started seeing healings. Didn't really know much about deliverance other than my son. Well, then after 6 years, she tried to stop me from doing ministry. She tried to kick me out of my bed for nothing. I didn't do anything. Again, my first wife, I say it was 50-50 our faults, but with my second wife, it wasn't. He changed me to be able to take on the project, I don't call it a project, but the situation, And it's kind of like if you think about a little bit like Gomer and Hosea. I didn't even know that story was even in the Bible until after I married. And then I read it, and I'm like, I mean, she's not a prostitute, she didn't have to do that. But it's very similar because God has a huge plan to purify the church, his bride, to be pure and spotless. And then it may take an extreme circumstance to go through it. So after I gone through 6 years of it, the Lord finally spoke to me because she tried to stop me from doing ministry. And I was chomping at the bit because I'd learned so much and I wanted to start doing it. And the Lord's like, you need to separate from her. And I'm like, I don't want to separate. I go, get her delivered from whatever she has. He wouldn't tell me. He said, you got to separate because he said that spirit in her hates you, wants to kill you. I'm like, no, duh. I go, get her delivered. Like we promised. You promised that, and we're going to do this together. And so ultimately he said, here's what's going to happen. He said, you have to separate. When you separate, I will start to grow the ministry around the world through you. You will get it set up. He said, she's going to lie about you horribly, and trash your reputation. Is going to be horrible for you. I'm like, what? After all that I did? Are you kidding? And he said, no. He said, eventually people will see the fruit of your ministry. People will hear the lies of what she spoke, and they won't believe over what she said. And so I separated January 23rd, 2015, and I didn't plan to that day. Didn't have any preconceived ideas to. I just wanted to get away and have peace because it was just awful going through this for 6 straight years. And I know a lot of people have gone through this stuff for 30 years, longer. It's hell on earth. It really is. It's misery. And so when I separated, it was not until 2 weeks later that I was revealed what happened. Because she started lying about me immediately. And a mutual friend that she had told lies to, she ended up going out to lunch with me and another friend of mine. And she didn't discern what she was saying. She said, this is not true. What she's saying is not true. So that was a miracle in itself. And then it was about a week later that the Lord finally had her and I talk on the phone, and I explained a little bit about what I went through during the 6 years. And right away, she knew exactly what she had. And I'm like, how do you know? I go, I've been waiting for 6 years for God to tell me this, and he won't tell me. I go, so what do you think it is? She goes, I know exactly what it is because my sister has the same thing. She goes, not to that extreme level, but pretty close to that. I'm like, well, what is it? She goes, she has a spirit of Jezebel and a spirit of Leviathan. I'm like, okay, I've heard of Jezebel. She's not a nice person. I go, but Leviathan, what the heck is that? Never heard that before. He said, look, and she said, look it up. It's in Job 41. The whole chapter talks about it. So I'm like, oh, okay. So I started researching it. Job 41. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it all describes essentially this Leviathan creature from the waters, a serpent. Its rows of scales are its pride. And the last 2 verses really speak it, and basically it's very hard to defeat, hard to kill, basically is what it describes. It's very fierce and so forth. But in the last 2 verses it says, verses 33, 34 of Job 41, on earth there is nothing like him which is made without fear. He beholds every high thing, which is pride. He is king over all the children of pride. So I'm like, pride. I saw that a lot in her and her family. Of course, I had pride as well, but I was like, pride. That's interesting. And then I read more about the Jezebel spirit, and In fact, I listened to Robert Morris from Gateway Church in Dallas, and I read a book by John Paul Jackson, Unmasking the Jezebel Spirit. Everything I read described her to a T. So I'm like, this is exactly. So I remember I sent her an email saying, honey, you know, this is so awesome. I finally know what's wrong. And so I sent that to her, and you would have thought she would have thanked me and said, oh my gosh, I can't wait to get delivered. No, she did not respond that way. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a lot harder than I thought, you know. And of course, she was lying to people in the church, lying to the pastor. The pastor was buying this. The pastor is kicking me out of the church, saying have nothing to do with my people. And I'm thinking, are you kidding? I should get a Purple Heart when I just went through. They're kicking me out, stopping me at the curb. What's wrong with you, you know? And so they wouldn't help me. They encouraged her to actually divorce me for her fourth divorce. And she did. And I'm like, are you kidding? What is wrong with you? All these prophetic words we had, you know? And so ultimately the Lord, I had a talk with him. I'm like, what were you thinking? And it's like, well, here's the deal. Because I was reading all this stuff, and it described everything. And I'm like, well, everything it talked about to get delivered from these spirits didn't give me any hope. Because there's like one of the most impossible, hardest things to ever do is get people delivered from this. You have to get them into a room. They're going to lie their way out of it. They're just, it's not easy to get them set free. So I'm like, well, gosh, God, what I want to know is how do you get these spirits? How do you jump on you from a Jezebel tree, or you go out swimming in the Pacific Ocean, and the Leviathan jumps on you? How do you get these? Because if I'm going to get people delivered, I want to explain to them how we do it. So I like to have fun with deliverance, if you didn't know that. So. I'm not your typical deliverance guy, I don't think. So I can use stand-up tonight. So, yeah. So here's what the Lord showed me, because this is how they get the spirits. He said, by far and away, it's through father and mother wounds as they grow up, getting hurt by their dad or their mom. The other way that they can get them is through sexual violations, or if their mom or dad were involved in any type of secret societies, Freemasons, Shriners, Eastern Star, you know, all this stuff, where they make these oaths to the enemy, to Satan and stuff, behind closed doors, if they stayed in it long enough. How it's all about money and so forth. So I'm like, because my grandfather was involved in Freemasons. I didn't know it at the time until after he died. And my grandmother was in deliverance ministry, but she had Jezebel. She was very controlling of her husband. And so I'm like, well, how do you get it? If I still don't understand father wounds, mother wounds, how does that work? And sexual violations. He said, well, here's how it works. It's very simple. He said, if they grew up with a father that was not close to them, and it could be that he was working a lot and never spent much time with them, just that alone can cause them to feel rejected. You know, and as they hear the voices of the enemy chiming into their own thoughts, then they start to hear that familiar voice, and as they get older, that voice tells them that, hey, you can't trust your daddy. Your daddy was never there for you. Your daddy didn't love you. In fact, this new person you're marrying, guess what? He's a man. He's just like your dad. So therefore, you cannot trust him. And therefore, why don't you tell him what to do, because your dad told you what to do all the time. Or, you know, again, the more pain that a person went through from a father wound or a mother wound, because there's mothers that are controlling, that are manipulative, and that's how it all starts, is they start having these pains come in. Or they could have been having a good dad or mom, but they could have been sexually violated. You know, because we see that a lot of times when a person gets sexually violated, they don't tell anybody. And then they grow up and they have all these spirits whispering to them, telling them to hate that person that did what they did to them. And they keep it a secret, so nobody knows. You know, and so I'm thinking, oh my gosh, so as they get older, then what happens, they get into a relationship and they end up getting selfish. And these are the descriptions of people that have the spirit of Jezebel. They are anxious and fearful. Why? Because they had a trauma that happened to them. And they weren't protected. So they're going to have thoughts from the enemy causing them to have fear. They're going to be controlling, because they feel if they control other people, they'll never have to be hurt again if they tell them what to do. You know, and they're manipulative. They can be subtly manipulative, or they can be overtly manipulative. Like, if you don't do what I want you to do, I'm going to throw a knife at you. I'm going to throw a glass at you. You know, I saw that side. I saw my first wife have the subtle version of it. You know, and I can say that I had all three of these. I'm going to talk about Jezebel, Leviathan, and Ahab, because wherever you have a Jezebel, they would draw to marry someone that has an Ahab. You know, I was a stronger Ahab. You'll be stronger towards Ahab, or you'll be stronger towards Jezebel. Those are the different spectrums normally. You'll be jealous if you're Jezebel. You're going to be very jealous, especially if your spouse is doing ministry, because you're going to want what they've got, and you're going to be very jealous of them. You're going to be demanding. You're going to be normally sexually impure or sexually selfish. You're going to lie, sometimes very, very elaborate lies, that when you're in the church and you're whispering these lies to people, getting them to believe it, it's going to end up hurting the church. That's why you see most church splits are because of people that have Jezebel and Leviathan, because they're in there whispering these lies to everybody, so they can shut it down and shut down the Holy Spirit from flowing. They want to shut down the Holy Spirit. They also have a desire for power and leadership. They want to get into leadership. So if you have a pastor, say, that has an Ahab spirit, they're going to not want to have any confrontation. So they will simply oftentimes have a lot of people that have the Jezebel spirit around them that are controlling and manipulative, and they know that they can get away with what they want, because if they don't get what they want, they get angry, and they raise their voice, and they get mad. And whoever gets the angriest and maddest normally wins. They give in to them. They'll intimidate. They'll dominate. They act assured, but they're very insecure inside. They cannot stand to be told no. They love to provoke people to get them angry. And once they get angry, then they point the finger back at them and say, look how bad that you are. You're like, well, wait a minute. Oh my gosh, that's not me. They're like, yes it is. I just saw you behave like that. Oh, wait a minute. You started the fight. You're the one that started. I was reading my Bible, being quiet. You came into the room and you start provoking me. And of course I'm going to stand up and get mad and angry. And they're like, look how bad that you are. They love to start arguments and then leave the room. Like they'll come into a room, they'll come into the family, they'll come into a church and start these arguments and striving, and then they'll walk out and just smile and say, I got all this strife going. And they also constantly have the chatter from the enemy in their mind. They can never rest. They can never have peace. They can never go to sleep at night, because that enemy's up there chattering all day long, all night long, causing all this strife. And those that have Jezebel always have Leviathan. Leviathan, spirit of pride, is what it is. And there's a lot of prideful people that are in the church that the Lord knows, and He sees them, and a lot of them are in leadership. Some of them are pastors, pastors' wives, some of them are worship leaders, intercessors, healing room people. I've seen the gamut. And that they will twist communication in their mind. Like you can actually have a conversation with somebody, and they're hearing something completely different. And they don't hear what you said, and then they swear you said something. They're like, you did too say that. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. No, I didn't. So it causes all this strife in communications. It's a mess. In fact, I was talking to one of my Restorative Freedom certified people that his mom used to have arguments with his dad. And they were just talking about this now that she's gotten set free and delivered, and he was like, yeah, he goes all the time, because there would be arguments going on, and then he would hurt dad, and dad would end up trying to confront her back about it gently, and she would completely have no recollection of it at all. I never said that. I never said, yes, you did. So it makes you feel like you're going crazy when you're dealing with people that have that spirit. The other thing that I found very curious, because I've done thousands of individual deliverance sessions, and I used to have my own healing rooms for a couple of years, is that spirit will wrap around a person's back, their spine, and it will twist. So oftentimes they'll have back pain and neck pain, have headaches a lot, go to the chiropractor often, have insomnia. They try to fall asleep at night, and they can't. It will wake them up all the time, so they cannot fall asleep, so they can't have any dreams from the Lord. It'll also conversely cause you to fall asleep when you're trying to read Christian books for a while. You will fall asleep. You cannot stay awake to receive anything. People a lot of times have scoliosis. I used to have scoliosis. I used to have headaches. Fibromyalgia, for no one reason, is because of the Leviathan spirit. Many other diseases and afflictions. You know, Freemasons again, Scottish Rite, Shriners, Eastern Star, all that stuff brings in this curse of the Leviathan. I've seen it time and time again. I work with people over in the United Kingdom, in England, and that's where a lot of this stuff started from, back in the 1700s. And so many people there have back pain, neck pain, and this one woman, she was in a healing room, was training other people, praying for people, and they would get healed, but she herself had twisted organs. The doctor told her that she had that. That was Leviathan's, the reason why. It twisted the organs inside of her. So once she got delivered, she got healed. She didn't have that anymore. You know, I see people all the time, they go through these prayers, which we'll do at the end here. You take your authority, you command the stuff to go, you take away the legal right the enemy has. He has no more legal right, he has to go. You command him to go to hell. And I see people instantaneously having their backs move and adjust back into position properly. Or their test, you know, their twisted organs get healed. You know, their back pain, their neck pain, all that stuff gets healed. And so those that have Jezebel, Leviathan, as a stronger default will marry those that have the Ahab spirit. Ahabs do not like confrontation. They like to make everybody happy. They're afraid of being rejected. They don't like to take responsibility because if it goes bad, they get blamed for it. That's why they can marry someone that has a Jezebel spirit, because they don't mind all day long making decisions, you know. And if it goes bad, they don't take responsibility for it. They blame somebody else. But Ahabs oftentimes have a challenge making decisions. They can feel insecure. They feel abandoned pretty easily. They're very nice people oftentimes, but they're too nice. They just let things go because if a person has a Jezebel spirit, they know that if they stand up to them, they're going to get yelled at.
Yeah.
They're going to have an argument on their hands for a long time. So I might as well just let them get their way, you know. And so we see this in about 80-85% of marriages to some degree, where we have a Jezebel marrying an Ahab. And it's like, when the Lord first told me this, I'm like, no, you're crazy, God. He's like, no, watch. And so he starts bringing me people. This is like starting in, I separated in January 20, 2015. It was in April that my first woman came to me. She had been sexually molested by her father. And as I'm describing this stuff for her, I can see light bulbs going off in her head. And she's like, I'm married to my husband for 2 years. All we've done is fight and argue. Not one counselor, not one pastor has ever been able to fix this. I think I have what you're talking about. So I'm preparing myself for getting knives thrown at me, you know, in classes. And she doesn't do that. She's like, how do I get delivered? I'm like, oh, thank God. Well, that's like 90% of the battle is getting you to see it. I go, the other 10% is just taking authority, commanding. So I asked the Lord, I'm like, yeah, how do you get them delivered? He said, number one, they have to choose to forgive. Because if you don't choose to forgive, then that gets the root of bitterness. And therefore, the enemy has a legal right to stay on them. And the Lord cannot forgive them. So that's legally how it's set up. If we have any anger towards it, so it doesn't seem fair, because if you're a victim and you grew up with a pain from a father or a mother, it's like you're victimized again, because now you have a demonic spirit that has a legal right to speak to you up here in your mind, and you hear his thoughts all day long. You hear the chatter, and it tells you to be controlling and manipulative and don't trust anybody. All this junk. So you have to choose to forgive. And if you can't choose to forgive, then the enemy still has a right. That's why when you ask Jesus into your heart, the demons don't have to go, because you're still bound by your soul wounds that you have. And that explains a lot what's wrong with this world. You know, the whole world's got this stuff. You know, you see it in politics, you see it in business world, you see it in you know, churches, obviously, you see it in families, you know, and so you have to choose to forgive, and you have to mean it. How do you know if you've chosen to forgive? Well, if that person that harmed you walks in the door right now, how would you react to them?
You know.
Would you be mad? Would you be angry? Would you want to punch them? Or could you go up and give them a hug? Or even a kiss? You know? Well, Jesus could, you know? So that's what we're supposed to do. And of course, we can say it, but if we don't really mean it in our hearts, then the enemy knows, and he has a legal right to still stay on us. So that's the first thing you have to do, is choose to forgive. There's a scene in the movie The Shack, if you've ever seen The Shack. And they take him into a cave. Of course, in the movie, if you've not seen it, he's been hurt by his dad. He was beaten up in a shack. And so he's got a lot of anger towards his dad. Well, then he's angry at God, because dad represents God. And so they take him into a cave and say, okay, you're so angry at God, you be God, and you judge who goes to heaven and goes to hell. When they start showing them all these mean people, it's like, it goes to hell, goes to hell, goes to hell, and then they show a little boy. It's like, well, that little boy shouldn't go to hell, he's innocent. And then they pan back and they see that little boy was your father, and it shows him getting beaten up by his father. Well, that's exactly what we see, is when your grandfather was beaten by his grandfather.